welcome, and hopefully get some things that are relevant to you and can help you in your future here as far as international food laws and regulations and being able to trade your country's products to ours. Okay. There we go. So we're going to talk about It's a Small World. Food comes from all over the country. Codex is important to your country. We're going to talk about some US FDA import refusals as they refer to your country, as well as the EU notifications and the country of origin. The importance of internet on the Codex work. And as you can see, we had trouble with internet this morning, but the reality is, instead of having to travel for great distances, Codex does do a lot of work on the internet, which at times is very helpful to all of us. There's some global food issues that our Codex is involved with, and we want to introduce the three sisters, Codex, OIE, and the IPPC, and look at some of their recent activity, as well as how Codex works and the relationship between Codex and the WTO. So here we're going to see a picture of Dr. Haggerty. Since he couldn't be here, he should be on his way to Africa today. And you can see that the Codex screen shows that you can get just about any information on the committees, the meetings, the resources, as well as the Codex text. So it's all at your fingertips, and I hope you will go to Codex Alimentarius and check this out, and you can check and see what your country is also doing. Probably this is more for English than it is other things, that the language and the numbers are different. The biggest thing is the dates. We always transpose those in the United States compared to others. The measurements are different. Some of the names are different. So as far as the spelling and the names, it's something you got to play with a little bit, but it's really not that difficult or that unusual to deal with. So there are publications that explain Codex Alimentarius. You can go to the website of the FAO, and you can understand the Codex Alimentarius, what's next for the standards. This is something important for each country to look at. The Codex of 2019 was the year of food safety. And that's what we're talking about today. So food safety has been seen as a very important thing, not only for the health of the citizens of your country, but also for trade. And there's the science of the food standards and the trade in the food standards, because most of you are part of the WTO. Trade is important, and you have agreed to use Codex Alimentarius as standards for trades and SPS. So here are the countries represented today and the years that your country joined Codex Alimentarius. I wish we were all together so I could actually see you and have some interaction with you. I don't think the last two countries that joined are on this, and I apologize for that. I tried to include it in some of the other areas. I'm happy to say that I've been to over half of these countries, and my grandson has Brazilian citizenship, so that's always important to me. But it's good to at least have some viewpoints and some memories of those areas. So my question is how many of you know your Codex contact person? Do you know what division they're part of and who they are? If you don't, before the week is over, I really hope that you will go to this website, you will search your country, and you will find out who your contact person is. This is the person that's supposed to bring back the information to you that's being discussed and your participation of how it affects you. So Codex Alimentarius is food code in Latin. It was established in 1963 under the United Nations, and we now have 188 countries, plus the European Union, which is quite a few extra countries. It's administered by the WHO and the FAO, and it's there to protect consumer health and to promote fair practices in food trade. This is very important for some of the smaller countries that are trying to do food trade, that they have someone in there who's actually looking at how to keep the trade fair. The World Trade Organization uses the Codex standards and guidelines for food disputes. This is huge. So if you are a small country and you think that you're being treated unfairly by another country to trade food, the guidelines that are used are the Codex standards, not the national standards of the other countries in yours, but the Codex standards. So many developing countries use Codex standards in developing their national food laws and regulations. And if you happen to be a country who does not have food laws right now, you can use the Codex standards for trade. So there again, creating these global standards and guidelines and codes of practice for food and nutrition industries is what Codex Alimentarius does. It was created to protect consumer health and to promote fair trade practices. It's the primary political battlefield where the war is being waged of who will control and regulate the global food and nutrient supply. So when it comes down to the end, the Codex is the judge. So it's important because the WTO agreement on agriculture has doubled since it came into process in 1995. Excuse me. There are billions of tons of food that are produced, marketed, and transported globally. 99% of the world's population is covered by Codex membership. So you are not alone in this. And with 189 members, it covers most of the world. Besides that, there are 240 Codex observers. So these different unions and food technologists and trade unions represent each country every time that there is a meeting of Codex. So the actions by the Codex are looking to adopt new or revised food quality and safety standards. Now, these are the standards that are for ready-to-use foods for the management of malnutrition children. This is something they're really focusing on this year because there are many children in this world that are malnutrition. And we have to find a way to find foods that can be utilized by them to increase their health and for trade. The risk analysis principles, especially for pesticide residues, is being looked at, as well as a performance criteria for the methods of determining marine biotoxins. A lot of your countries ship fish. This is important. So not only with that, but the food additives that are being used for fish and fishery products. The specification of identity and purity of food additives. Food additives are different in different countries. The EU standards for food additives and the US standard for food additives are different. So depending on where you're shipping, you have to look at what additives have been accepted and what ones haven't. So one of the things that is important, even some of your small countries that have not been participating within the Codex standard groups, you have your Codex regions. And by being part of that, you have a potential for markets because you are looking at products that are specific to your area and making sure that regional standards for those food products are being made within your particular area so that trade can happen. So here's a list of the active Codex committees. And I want you to kind of look at this. On the bottom is the coordinating committees for Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, North America, and Southwest Pacific, and the Near East. So your country not only belongs to the Codex meetings, they belong to these coordinating committees that focus on issues that are important to your area and your country. But all of these other ones are also very important, and many of them can be done through the internet. So you don't have to travel to Rome or Brussels or China. You can actually participate on the internet. So it's important that you talk with your Codex person saying, I see we're having a lot of issues with pesticide residue refusals or our sampling or our veterinary drugs. By participating in Codex, they're going to help you with some of the options that you have, so to making trade easier. So when you look at which Codex committees your country should attend, these are the questions that need to be answered. What are your country's significant food safety and health issues? And what are the issues that are most relevant to the consumers, the people who live within your country? And what are the primary agri-food exports and import industries contributing to your country's economy? And what are the agricultural food priorities of most relevance to the domestic producers? I work with a lot of producers around the world. One of the things they seem to be having a lot of problems with right now, especially with the beginning of PHMSA, is with labeling. And most of the rejections in the EU and the US are concerned about labeling. Some of these are very difficult for you to do because we think they're common sense. It has to do with the way we do business. But in another countries, such as Lebanon and many other countries, they don't have a zip code, nor do they have a street address. The labeling would be refused if that wasn't put in there. So we have to figure out how to find a zip code. So the other things you should look at are which Codex committee elaborates standards, guidelines, or related text pertaining to the areas identified above. What resources, time, money, and other things are available to commit to the Codex program? That is one of the good things right now with everything being online, that it doesn't take as much time and money to be able to participate. And what are the opportunities for regional collaboration? We're going to talk about how some of you are participating in that and the good that you are doing. So I put this together. These are your countries. I think I have all of them that I've been told about. And these are the participations in the last year with Codex meetings. So we looked at labeling, hygiene, pesticide, contaminants, inspections, additives, spices, and veterinary drug residues. So as you can see, some countries participate in almost every one of them. Some of them have only participated in one or two. Some have not been able to participate. And I'm sure there's multiple reasons for that. But even when you look at a small country like this one, you have worked on national standards. And I am probably going to kill this word, magoo. But it is a product that a fermented cereal-based drink. I've actually drank this in a couple countries. It's a special beverage. I enjoyed it. And because of your participation, you were able to get specifications and get this passed for a Codex standard so that it is now available and accepted for trade. Another one is Rwanda has worked on trade preparation for biofortified. This has to do with the micronutrients being added to food. And this is especially important this year as we're working with malnutrition. India has worked with the Ayurveda regulations. It's something important in their country. I've gone back and forth and gotten some certification in Ayurveda, and I practice a lot of it myself. But I think it's important that we see that cultures and belief systems and multiple things go into the food that we trade around the world. And each of you have a part in trying to put this together and making it safe as far as food safety, but also safe for trade to help your countries. So the new work that Codex Alimentarius committee is going to work is prioritizing list of veterinary drugs and pesticides for evaluation. This is an up and coming problem. It's something we've had a lot of concerns about. Different countries allow different drugs and pesticides. What are the levels that they should be accepted at? And should some of those levels even be zero? Also, antimicrobial resistance. This is from using a lot of veterinary drugs. I have been battling with this for over a year, so it's near and dear to my heart. Also, reactivating the committee on milk and milk products. Committees are sometimes put on inactive list if there's nothing for them to do. And now with the new milk and milk products coming out, some of them are plant-based. The committee has become reactivated and is looking at some of these concerns. We're promoting further collaboration between Codex and the OIE, and the Codex Trust Fund has come into the light again. So quick questions for you. Do you know your country's Codex contact point? And maybe some of you can just go in to the chat room and state that you do or you do not. And does your Codex contact person keep you up to date on Codex issues? Get your input before Codex meetings? Are they talking to processors? Does it have a website dedicated to Codex issues? In which government department is the contact point located? This is different in different countries. Usually there are many government departments, from public health to agriculture to trade. And sometimes you have a food safety authority, but not always. And are you informed on the regional Codex meetings? So I'm just kind of curious if you can give us some feedback on that. I would appreciate it.
Yeah, to Christine's question, you want Christine to post, to have the answer posted in the chat box, or how do you want?
Yes, that would be very nice if we had the answers. You don't have to answer all of them, but I would appreciate some feedback from the people of, do they know the answers to any of these questions, or do they have questions about it?
Yeah, there are already answer posted. I think you can see it, am I right?
Right.
So for Malaysia, India, oh, excellent.
I'm always surprised as I work with governments and different food safety entities in countries. There are many officials who don't even know the answers to this, and it's always a surprise to them. Getting this information out and making more people aware of it does help food safety and trade in your country.
Yeah, responses are that are popping up. So for Ghana, this is the Ghana Standard Authority, FDA, Rwanda Food Safety Regulation.
Thank you for your feedback there. It always helps to have some information. And because handling food risk, it's kind of like juggling. One place doesn't take care of everything. It's a network, and we all have to work together on it. Public health is important with food safety. The science behind it, it's changed sometimes. What we thought used to be safe is not safe. Things that we question, are they safe? It'll be science in the long run that determines if it is safe or not. But the consumer confidence is the one who determines if they accept that or not. So we need to look and make sure that our consumers understand what's going on so that it has confidence in the science and in the public health. So the communication is important. Politics determines a lot of what is allowed within a country. It puts together our food standards. It puts together our food safety authorities, and it helps promote trade within your country. So when we talk about handling food risk, All these things are very important. So global governance of food safety is urgently needed. Unsafe food causes more than 200 diseases, 600 million, almost 1 in 10 people in the world get sick after eating contaminated food each year, and 420,000 die every year. Children under 5 years of age carry 40% of the foodborne disease burden, with 125,000 deaths every year. This is put out by the WHO, but I think sometimes we don't understand how food causes so many of the diseases, the sickness, and the deaths that people within our countries deal with. And this isn't just in your country. This happens in our country of the United States. It happens in the EU. This is a global issue. We have InfoSan today, which is a voluntary network of food safety authorities from around the world. And it has 188 member states. It's managed by the WHO and the FAO. And quite often when there is a food safety issue in one country, it is quickly put on the internet and processed. Where is the active food safety issue coming from, going to? And how can we connect with it and utilize the science from all the countries to help with the food safety issue that is being seen on a global scale? Because just like this, you look at one box of a pizza and you have 35 products from 60 countries and 5 continents in that pizza. And what you eat today on that pizza, tomorrow could be totally different. As you can see, the dough could have come from France or the UK or Poland or the USA, because in the country of origin, it might say Ireland, but everything on that pizza can come from someplace else. And depending on the price, it can come from someplace else one week and another week someplace else that happens to be selling it cheaper. So food is a global issue in every country. The international recall of whey and protein, it's not showing up here. But anyway, it showed like InfoSan that it comes from New Zealand and then it gets shipped all over the world. So when a recall happens, it starts coming and it spreads and then it continues to spread, and we have no idea what the secondary distribution is. It's really hard to find something, but when the initial notification comes from InfoSan, from say New Zealand, then everybody starts looking for where is that food going, where has it been distributed, and how can we keep the people safe? So there's some intimidating numbers that we have to look at for this global regulation. There are approximately 1,000 substances approved for use in the manufacture of food contact materials just in the US, in the EU, excuse me. But there are 1,000 grandfathered chemicals added to food without review or even notice to the FDA in the USA. India has approved 11,000 food additives, and there's 16,000 foods with toxic chemicals in the packaging, such as BPAs in the US, and there's 2,000 botanical health claims on hold in the EU. So every day when we look at food safety, we're seeing all these different chemicals and substances and additives, and we're trying to figure out which ones are safe and which ones aren't. And these global regulations have to be looked at separately as well as together to see how they work. So does your country have a successful food regulatory system? And to know if it's successful, you look at it. Is it responsive? Is it responsive to the crisis or to a new scientific development? Is it focused on outcomes? Does it not inhibit innovation? Is it a predictable system based on good science? that rules apply consistently and fairly to large and small size companies and to imports and to domestic foods? Are the controls appropriate to the risk? Is it independent, not influenced by politics or money or big business? Is it up to international standards? If not, Codex can help that. One of the classes that Dr. Haggerty just taught at MSU was on drafting, amending, updating food laws for government, industry, and consumer inputs. This was done by the College of Law and is a class that is available. It's a 1-credit class. And it tells about how to do a new food law, amend it, regulate it, guidelines, and how to draft it. Actually, my daughter is in law school right now at Michigan State, and she just took this class, and she learned a lot. So you don't always want to know what the law is, you want to know who the judge is. So all countries have different food laws and regulations, but when it comes down to trade, the judge is Codex Alimentarius. So these are some of the FDA rejections that have happened in your country. This is not meant to make anybody feel uncomfortable. This happens in the US, as you will see, as far as any place else. And sometimes we have to look at this and say, okay, what is some of our problems? When it comes to marine life, fish, and products from the sea, we will find filthy quite often. This is not always the problem of the processor. It could be the problem of the shipper, and food hasn't been kept cold enough, and by the time it gets here, it is considered filthy or unfit for eating. As you will see, there's a lot of misbranding, like I talked about in Lebanon. It's a matter of, is the address correct? Do you have the new nutritional label put on there right? So each country that you are going to ship to has labeling restrictions that you have to look at. Salmonella, sulfites, adulterations, unsafe colors, pesticide residues, alterations such as in milk, teas. Some of you have not had reports yet, but hopefully we work through this and your trade to us becomes even more. Ethiopia and Rwanda, obviously you have coffee and that doesn't fall under these rejections. So we still are getting some from you. The EU import refusals, you will see that most of the time mislabeling is an issue, documents, and unapproved treatments and processes happen. So that's kind of a violation of how it's divided up. And you will see the top number of notifications of the country of origin, salmonella, aflatoxins, mercury, formaldehyde. These are hazards that we are seeing more and more of. Also the categories of the mycotoxins, pathogenic microorganisms, fraud, pesticide residues, insufficient controls, food additives, flavorings, heavy metals. So all of these things are cause for rejection in food safety. And they're in all the products that we have, whether it be nuts or meats or fruits and vegetables or fish or herbs, cereals, baked goods. We are finding them in all of our products. So if we look by country, we will see some of the countries are shipping specific products that have specific things they need to worry about. And that's why it's important to become part of Codex, to follow the standards of Codex, to help you make sure that you're safely exporting food to all the countries. So here again is the USDA research showing the data and some of the different things that we're seeing, adulteration and misbranding and others. So China is saying that they are rejecting foods. And on this, they are saying that the unqualified foods come from over 80 countries or region. And the top 4 was Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, and the US. So the reason they're refused is because they do not comply with China's laws and regulations. And you look at the rejections, it's food label, food additives, documents, and the documents include quarantine approval, which has become a bigger thing even in the US, because now we're doing detention without physical examination, and that's a whole nother compliance issue to deal with. So adulteration accounts for about 57% of violations in the US, and the remainder are for violations of misbranding. So the most frequent are pathogen, toxin adulteration of salmonella. So salmonella obviously is something that is a worldwide problem that we need to work harder on. Some newer risks that are looking for global governance, nanomaterials, natural, endocrine disrupting chemicals, pesticides, food contact materials, antibiotics, insects in food and feed. Some of your countries are much more familiar with this than we are in some of our countries like the US. Genetically modified organisms, allergens, cool, the country of origin label has been a concern with trade, and food fraud. So these are some of the global issues that we are all starting to look at and say we really don't have enough regulations and rules.
Page loser.
So when we come to some of this, GMOs are something we're going to talk about here, but these are something that Codex Alimentarius has adopted new standards for. And these standards represent a new baseline for international measures regulating GMOs. So Codex has decided that this is something they have to look into. Currently, labeling of GMOs for international trade is voluntary. But when it comes to the EU, they treat genetically modified crops as a new food. They're subject to extensive case-by-case evaluations, and they can only be allowed for market in the EU if they've received authorization. So the EU is looking at this differently, and that's one reason Codex is becoming involved to look at what is a good overall look internationally. So when you go to the EUs, and I've included this just kind of to see that if you're interested in trade, Codex is looking at this, but the EU is still saying, okay, we're looking at it for risk assessment. We're looking at it as the measures of our member states. So it's actually the member states who are going to determine if they're accepting GMOs or not. But then the authority will just make the final decision. The United States is a strong supporter of GMO development cultivation. And so our country, our 3 regulatory agencies are looking at this differently. Most of our soybeans, corn, granola, and sugar beets are GMOs. And as long as they are processed to the point that the DNA cannot be detected, they do not have to be labeled as GMOs. So there you have an example of different takes on a new food that's being done. And if you look at the policy developments in different countries around the world, you will see that each one is handling GMOs a little bit differently. So that's why it's important for Codex Alimentarius to become part of, and then they will be able to allow trade with all these countries looking at it differently. So sometimes everyone doesn't agree, and the WTO has to look. There was a cool country of origin label for beef and pork, and the complaint was from Canada to the United States. There were third parties of other countries that also had a complaint. They asked for this, and when the panel determined it was less favorable treatment to imported Canadian cattle and hogs than to domestic products. And nobody was really satisfied with this. But the thing is it's not about everybody being satisfied. It's about being fair to everyone that's involved in trade. So when we look at introducing the three sisters, we have Codex Alimentarius, and there is the website for it. We have the World Organization for Animal Health, and there's the website for that. And I know we're going to talk about that further. And the International Plant Protection Convention. So if you are dealing with animals and plants, these are the places to go to find out how decisions Codex makes with the three sisters working together. The OIE is the intergovernmental organization responsible for improving animal health worldwide. The IPPC is the international treaty to secure action to prevent the spread and introduction of pests of plants and plant products and to promote appropriate measures for their controls. It adopts the standards for phytosanitary measures. And if you're a contributory to the WTO, obviously this is important. So the OIE has sections, when you look that up, on food safety, antimicrobial resistance, food safety as far as biology risk, standards and international trade, strengthening veterinary services, animal diseases, animal welfare, and it's based on One Health. The IPPC issues on the website are products cultivated in wild plants by preventing the introduction and spread of pests as a guideline on pests. Obviously, these guidelines and the list on pest and pest reporting also are very important to Codex when it comes to pesticide residues. So the three sisters work together in order to improve food laws and food safety. So some of the suggestions for improving that are with education, increased use of the internet. And I know some places that is difficult because of electricity or internet capacity. We need to update food laws and their application. We need to help with the elimination of fraudulent use and the application of those laws, increase transparency, and the recognition of consumer variability. Each of our countries have food that is important to us and to our consumers. So there are variabilities in all of our rules and regulations for the food that our consumers want to eat. So in conclusion, your country's active participation in the three sisters is important for food safety and for international trade. The WHO says, according to the SPS agreement, members have the right to apply measures to protect humans, animal, and plant life and health. It covers decrees, regulations, testing, inspections, certifications, approval, procedures, and packaging, as well as labeling requirements directly related to food safety. So I have some things I would like you to think about this week as you go through these. This is like the second day, and you have a few more days to go through. And as you listen to our different talks and different information sharing and as far as the technology, I want you to think about what knowledge is applicable to your country and your culture, and how can it be utilized? What adjustments would need to be made? Is the technology useful and applicable to your country? And how could it become adaptable? Do you have the infrastructure, the capacity to utilize it? And what could be done to make it sustainable in your country? I have worked on way too many USAID projects and other organization projects overseas to be told that I had a scope of work and I was to go out and do such and such based on my culture, which when I got there had nothing to do with the culture that I was working with. So since this is a sharing, this is important to us as well as to you. If you hear something or if you see something, you say, that could be useful to my country, but we can't use it quite that way. Could we make an adjustment? Your input is important to us. And I hope our input can be important to you, and between us, we can become stronger in making food safety well for you as well as for us. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this and you got something out of it. And I look forward to hearing from you with any questions you might have. And I really appreciate the time you took this morning